My name is Glen Rabenberg, and I own and CEO of Soilworks. Big deal. What's that mean to you? We're the manufacturer of the extractor and also of the compost. But one of the things that I'd like to spend a short period of time talking about is, what do microbes like? What do good microbes like versus bad microbes? Because there's beneficial and there's also pathogenic bacteria. There's pathogenic fungus or fungi, and there's also beneficial. They like different things. We're going to talk about that because some soil isn't ready for microbial inoculation. And what I mean by that is what we're going to cover in the next short period of time. Before I start, I need to tell each and every one of you, I'm considered a disruptive speaker. I have been blackballed and taken off of many speaking dockets because I give information on how to solve problems. What do I mean by that? When the university academia professor stands up and says, a weed is just a plant growing out of place, I don't buy that. I don't buy it at all. Or when they look at your soil test, they go, oh boy, you're just going to have to buy more fertilizer because all these minerals are unavailable. Or they're tied up. Or you're talking to the academia about your pH of your soil. They said, well, you got a 7.5 pH. You're just going to have to deal with it. Bull. I'm a believer of creation, and we were given opposable thumbs and the ability to reason. I love what Jay has done with our extractor. And to give you a quick little secret, he's not here. He hasn't even seen the beginning of the good stuff that happens as the soil becomes more balanced. Anybody ever been to a soil seminar? They say, well, you need to balance your soil. But they don't tell you what that means or what it is or how to do it. So without further ado, we're going to try to attack this. This is very informal. If you have a question, shoot your arm up. If you're nervous about asking a question, write it down and we'll cover it later. I'm going to have some opinions, and I'm going to have some facts that a lot of you are going to agree with. That's okay. I'm going to say some things to you that you're going to do I don't know, this bald guy from South Dakota, I don't know if he knows much. And then there's going to be some things I'm going to say is like, now we know he is absolutely certifiably crazy. So if I may ask for one request, is all of you sit back, open up your mind to the possibilities of something that may be different than what you're used to. We're going to take you on a journey of success in the soil. We're going to take you on a journey with success in the plant. And with that, if I can see a show of hands, how many physicists, microbiologists, meteorologists, chemists do we have in the room? Oh, crap. It's kind of open for a couple. We're going to jump in and out of a lot of different sciences because these chemists, these agricultural chemists that say chemistry will explain everything about agriculture, they're foolish. It takes many sciences to understand life. And when we talk about life, the name of our company, Soilworks, isn't just a name. We actually have been working since long before the turn of the century to try to figure out how to make soil work. It worked before we were all here. These plants that were growing in the Garden of Eden surrounding it, I never heard the minister talk about a fertilizer plant or a chemical manufacturer by the Garden of Eden. These plants have all been here a long time. So what we're going to do, the orange sheet that we handed out, I'm going to work very hard to absolutely dump a truckload of information on you in a very short period of time. And at the end of our short period of time, if you don't think you've gotten any good information, come see me and I will refund the money that it cost you to get into the meeting today. This orange sheet we put together for a group in California. There's an Acres USA conference that was in Sacramento, UC Davis, and they asked us to give a talk on healthy soil and healthy plants. And then we had a field tour in one of our customers' orchards. So the information here, it applies to California, Kansas, Canada, Caledonia, Kazakhstan, Connecticut, because all plants like the same things. We have a lot of different backgrounds in a room, but we all need air. We all need food. Some of us aren't quite as good looking as others, but hopefully be a little bit funny. But hopefully we can all get along. So with that, we're going to start with healthy. The definition of healthy. Your definition may be higher or different than my definition of healthy. The definition of healthy that I like is without disease or impairment. Period. So, when we look at our fields, and when I say we, I'm a farmer, I'm third generation on our family farm in South Dakota, and what was chemical-free, just because Dad didn't believe in chemicals, we've now turned into organic. And boy, have we learned a whole lot about farming, trying to grow crops organically. What is healthy soil? Soil that can penetrate water, allow water in. Soil that will grow food. Soil that doesn't want to grow a weed, even though we're told it's just a plant growing out of place. Soils that don't have disease. Soils that don't grow armyworms, rootworms, cutworms, wireworms. That grow good healthy worms and good healthy bacteria and good healthy fungus. To give you an idea, my parents tried really, really hard to raise us, my brother and sister and I, well. They didn't teach me how to swear, spit, or steal, but we all learn because of an environment. Bad things happen. It's life. We can't control the price of commodities. We can't control the weather. It's either too wet, too dry, too windy, too calm, too whatever. That's farming. Let's control things we can, and that's in the soil. So if you do a soil test, hopefully you're doing a 0 to 6 inch, top 6 inch probe. You core your samples, you mix them up in a bucket, you send them off to the lab. The lab takes an acid, blasts those off different degrees of acids to see what's in that soil. So when you look at soil as a composition of what it is, 45% of the soil, if you just write in soil minerals by 45%, that's what makes up 45% of your soil. 5% of your soil should be, according to the experts, organic matter. Now, with the minerals that show up on your soil test, we're just going to go over the top 5. There's a lot of talk about the trace minerals. The copper, iron, zinc, and manganese that get tied up with glyphosate. They are important, but in most fields we've got bigger fish to fry, and there's more important and a better return on investment for money than some of those trace minerals. Number 1 mineral, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. The first mineral that normally shows up on your soil test is calcium. And in my mind, being from South Dakota and fairly simple, I think calcium is kind of the mother of all the other minerals. Because when calcium is equally distributed throughout an environment, no matter what it is, everything works well. Now, no judgment, no back and forth. If you are in a no-till situation, calcium is one of the heaviest minerals in the soil and naturally migrates down with moisture. What do I mean by that? We see a lot of problems showing up in all types of farming. We're based in South Dakota. We work in 38 states across the U.S. We're across all of Canada and 17 foreign countries. We see a lot of good and we see a lot of bad. What do I mean by that? In a lot of orchards, it's a no-till situation. They will do a 0 to 6 and they say, we have 3,500 pounds of calcium. We have all kinds of calcium. If you do an inch by inch in a 0 to 6, in most no-till situations, and no-till does work. But the top inch, virtually no calcium, because water and time has migrated that down. Second inch, virtually no calcium. Third inch, virtually no calcium. Fourth, yeah, we're seeing some calcium. Fifth, yeah, we're seeing some calcium. The 6th inch, there it is. But it migrates down with moisture. What's my point? Every microbe that you want in your soil has a skeletal structure, endo or external, inside or outside. It has to have calcium for physical structure and physical integrity. If there isn't available calcium in the top inch and you spray whatever compost down, if there's no calcium there, you're not going to be impressed. And to be honest, another secret, we don't want the call from anybody to say, yeah, we used your extractor and we're not impressed. We bought your Bio 5 and we didn't see squat. It's happened to every one of us. So what I'm going to try to do is to show you what we have found the hard way to prepare an environment for microbes. If you haven't applied calcium for some time, or if you haven't done any tillage for some time, unfortunately your topsoil will be short of available calcium. How do we know that? Because we've tested the soil and we've tested the plant. Now, when they say that calcium is unavailable, it's migrated down, it's probably now in an anaerobic zone. What do I mean by anaerobic zone? We'll get to that in just a little bit. Lack of air. The calcium has to be present in every cubic inch of soil to have life in every cubic inch of soil. People that have sleep apnea, if you need a CPAP, those people are short of calcium. How do I know this? In order to go into REM sleep, the human body has to relax 600 muscles. To relax those 600 muscles, you go into REM sleep and you actually get rest. Calcium is a deficiency in the human body that causes sleep problems. If soil is tight and stressed, lumpy, clumpy, cloddy, hard pan, plow pan, crusted, it doesn't have mother there, calcium, to relax it, to make it pliable, to accept water. So, and I apologize, I give a lot of different talks, and sometimes they're 1 day, 2 day, or 3 day seminars, and we're like, okay, let's try to put this into an hour. It's like, okay, we'll see what we can do. So I'm going to try to give you the most pertinent information that will make you wonder. It's like, I wonder if they actually know this stuff. I only speak of things we have proven ourselves and done with our own work. So I'm going to hop through these minerals quite quickly because we've got a lot of good stuff to cover because I made a lot of big promises up front. So calcium is the queen, calcium is the mother. Every mother has to have a father, and that father is phosphorus. Phosphorus doesn't leach down or up. It will move laterally, back and forth. And phosphorus is a mineral that facilitates everything to and through the plant. It's a conveyor of minerals. It's a catalyst of nutrients. And it's the #1 mineral for reproduction. And yes, there is reproduction in the soil. And yes, there is reproduction in the plant. If these beneficial microbes don't have good available phosphorus, they can't reproduce. Point being, you pay for an extractor, you buy microbes, you buy compost, you grow your fantastic Johnson Sioux. Whatever way you go, you put it out and you go, huh, wonder if Jay's full of crap, because I didn't see anything that Jay did. Jay's done some things right. You guys have done some things right. I know this for a fact, because if you weren't successful, you wouldn't still be in business. And if you weren't intelligent, you wouldn't be looking for something that may be better. So looking at your phosphorus, phosphorus has to be hooked to oxygen to get to the plant. What do I mean by that? If you look at your soil test, you'll have total P. You'll have P1. You'll have P2. What form of phosphorus can the only form be to get to the plant? P2O5. Every phosphorus has to have a handful of oxygen to get to the plant. If the oxygen isn't there in the soil for the phosphorus to pick up, it's going to turn into a union labor. It's like, oh, I don't work without oxygen. That's not my job. These conditions are horrible. I'm not moving. Now, does anybody have an idea where we could find some available oxygen for the soil? Say that again?
Right above it.
Right above us. Okay, now, that is a $1 answer. Why did I just give him $1? Thank you for that. Because knowledge is power, and make no mistake, the more you know, the better off you're going to be. So, while you're in control of things, and he said, right above us and right in us, the beneficial microbes breathe just like we do. They breathe in air. They exhale carbon dioxide, CO2. And there's also some nitrogen in the air. Anybody remember or anybody know how much nitrogen's in the air? Be loud, be proud. Oh, sorry. That was a little bit tougher one. There's a 10. Okay. I bet I'm going to get more answers now. And there is a limited supply here. 78% of every breath we take is nitrogen. Why are we buying any of it? It's crazy. And how can we get this nitrogen from the air down to the soil and into the soil? But we're still talking about phosphorus. Many times, and this will answer one of the questions, many times when your fertilizer guy will say, well, you got a lot of phosphorus in your soil, but it's all tied up, or it's unavailable. Guess what that P2 may be lacking? O5. If you're short of oxygen, nothing else matters. You can have on your favorite t-shirt, you can have on a brand new pair of socks. You could have just had a fantastic meal prepared by the lovely ladies in the kitchen. You run out of air, you're done. This is what's happening in American soils. Some people say, well, I've got some compacted soils. It's like, okay, define compaction. Well, it's hard. It's like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's like a brick. It's like, can you put a number to that? They said, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, the better you can identify something, the more accurate you have the ability to fix it. This isn't a weapon of torture. This is what they call a soil penetrometer. And there's a visible gauge on top. And as you pick the appropriate tip, dirt and sand, you push down. And if you're in clay, you push down till you get 150 psi. And that's, yep, you're already ahead of me, thank you. Right below that graph is what psi does soil need for proper respiration? 150 pounds per square inch. If you have more than that, more pressure than 150, the heavy, sinking, high-pressure front that is designed to push air into the soil bounces. You lose oxygen that was free. You lose nitrogen that was free. And you also lose 400 and some parts per million of CO2. Speaking of CO2, anybody interested in the carbon credits? Ever looked into it? Okay. I can guarantee you, if you follow some of the things we talk about, I guarantee each and every one of you will be recipients of large carbon credits. Guarantee it. Did you get that on tape, Tony? Great. Guaranteed it. It may not come from where you think it's gonna. It's gonna come from reduced nitrogen bill, reduced chemical bill, increase in quality, increase in quantity, increase in nutrition. 150 psi is the maximum pressure that a high pressure front can push and penetrate through. You know you have compaction in your soil because when you look back at the graph, we've got 45% soil minerals, we've got 5% soil organic matter. What's the other 50%? What's the other half? Water and air. Yeah, here's another 10 bucks. Nice work, thank you. Air and water equally make up the other half of the healthy soil. Now, why do we have this there? If you do your soil test and you find out you got good calcium, that you got good phosphorus, and you look at all the minerals and you get all the minerals absolutely perfect, you're going to get a 45% on your test being crop, because soil minerals only make up 45% of the soil. 150 psi will give you, and thanks for that great answer, will give you 25% air, 25% water. If you don't have 25% air in the soil, you will not hold water. You have to have the airspace. You have to have the vacancy. You have to have the soil's ability to absorb it. We all saw the picture that Jay showed earlier. Neighbor's field, standing water. His field, he's sticking his finger in the dirt. That's Mother Nature. Once you have ballpark, 150 psi. Now, don't lose your mind if you're checking and it's 152 or 144. This is like horseshoes and hand grenades. You get points for being close. Get in the ballpark and you'll win. As you push down, when you hit 150 psi, reach down and mark the top of the soil. If you only have this depth, you have very small lungs in your soil. Now, here's a question that has no dollar fixed to it, because I think I'm going to get a lot of answers. Does the soil actually breathe? How often does it breathe? Okay, now, one of the disruptive parts, the agronomist will say the soil does not breathe. It's the microbes within the soil, and it's the roots within the soil that breathe, but the soil actually doesn't breathe. Okay. There is respiration. Do we have any airline pilots? Anybody that's gone through pilot training understands a high pressure front is heavy air and they have to compensate to bring more lift because that's heavy sinking air. That's designed to push air into the soil to give you free nitrogen, to give you free carbon, to give you free oxygen. As that passes through, you have a low pressure front that brings air up. And that's normally after a rain. And you walk outside, oh, you smell that nice, good, earthy smell. Mother Nature just exhaled. If you're at 150 PSI ballpark, you're going to get that. The minerals that used to be unavailable or tied up will become available and will become untied as long as you get air to them. The goal for your aerobic zone, how deep your roots want to go in the crop that you're growing. The deeper you get your aerobic zone, the further the high pressure front gets pushed in, the more microbial activity you have, the healthier your soil is, healthy being without disease or impairment. Let's just start off with 6 inches. You may be surprised if you go out there. Now, these are less than $300. You don't have to buy one. Tell your neighbor you saw this great tool, and if they buy it, you'll show them how to use it. Or another option, if you've got a tile spade or a sand shovel, go out, and you can still do this in last year's crop and dig down and see where the roots are growing and what they're doing. If you do this penetrometer in the spring, that is going to be the softest, most mellow, relaxed soil of the season. As you get into May, June, and July, and that sun starts beating down and cooking that soil, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. Soil has personality, and anybody that farms understands that. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Livestock has personalities too. Soil should not be overly soft, gooey, and sticky when it's wet and turn to a dirty, rotten rock when it's dry. Nothing should change its personality that much. What one thing could possibly keep the soil more mellow? Calcium. Mother isn't there. She may not be available. She may be down in the basement. Okay, so we got calcium and phosphorus that are mom and dad. Phosphorus is a facilitator, and it's one of the largest users of oxygen to get to the plant. How do we know this? When you do a tissue test, a petiole test, or a sap test, the numbers that they give you on phosphorus is always, always, always P2O5. If you don't have oxygen to hook to the phosphorus, you're screwed. Nothing happens, and your fertilizer guy is right. And he wants to be right because they want to sell you more phosphorus. It's their job. It's the American way. You should try to use what you've already purchased or what's there. The other thing, of which Jay has already found out, say, Jay, thank you, by the way. You gave such great information. You guys are kind of a tough act to follow. You're putting a lot of pressure on me here, but the phosphorus. Every one of you have more phosphorus in your soil than what you see or what's shown. As you increase the viability of your soil, allow air to come in, all of a sudden microbes will start going to mining phosphorus, and you're going to get phosphorus to show up that you never knew you had. Point being, start creating an environment to get the indigenous microbes that you already have in your soil get them going to see what you've got, create the environment to grow good things. Okay, so we've got calcium and phosphorus, mom and dad. Now we're going to start with the kids. Potassium. Potassium is a water-loving mineral. Potassium is one of the #1 minerals when it's in excess that grows weeds. Potassium is normally one of the largest excesses in any type of manure, especially ruminant animals, dairy or feedlot. Potassium is the one mineral that will increase faster in a no-till situation than any other mineral that you're going to find. Why? Potassium got a nickname. Potash. The reason they call it potash is if you have a stove, you throw coal or wood or grass or burn anything, almost every other mineral, every other element will oxidize with the heat and go up the chimney and leave you. What's left when the fire's out? Potash. Take that potash out and throw it on a certain part of your yard, you will grow weeds. Big, strong, ugly, nasty weeds. And the higher the potassium gets, the nastier your weeds are going to get. These people that say, oh, we've got super weeds. No, you got super screwed up soil. Fix the problem. What's the problem? There's residue that isn't being digested. Now, please don't take note of this on a serious note, but as a funny note, none of you guys are no-till farmers. None of you are true no-till farmers. Because if you were truly a no-till farmer, when you got your food, you would have unbuttoned your shirt, you would have flopped the food on your belly, and you would have waited for it to osmotically absorb through your skin. I didn't see anybody do that. The quick way of digesting, put it into the soil, into your body, into the animal, is digestion in every sense of the word. What's that mean? Possibly, and I know this is going to be a dirty word with some of you, possibly some intelligent tillage. What's that mean? In South Dakota, we were very, very dry this year. Probably almost as dry as what you guys are. Dry enough to the point that some of the younger kids don't remember seeing rain up there. But from July on, we got no moisture. We go to do fall tillage, and to give you an idea, when I say tillage, normally 15 to 18 inches of rain per year is enough for the growing season to start moving and leaching minerals to the soil. We normally get that. We didn't get it this year. We got dirty, rotten, nasty, horrible, dry soil. We were scared to do any tillage at all. Just like anybody else, we didn't want it to blow. We have a piece of equipment called an airway. I'm not promoting airway. I'm promoting vertical aeration. And on our bean ground, we could twist those anywhere from 6 to 10 degrees, and all we were doing was poking holes. And why were we poking holes? Because we had compaction. We had over 300 pounds per square inch of compaction. And we know air isn't going to get into the soil if we're over 150. So we used a vertical aeration piece of equipment, and we poked holes 7 inches deep every 7 inches. It isn't as aggressive of tillage that we normally like to do. And here's going to be a dirty word in our world. We find that every 4 or 5 years, a moldboard plow absolutely makes sense and makes money. But we get enough rain to leach minerals. If you don't get enough rain, probably not the best situation. But as you look at the potassium, and I've talked to several of you guys, and I've heard several guys say, yeah, we're no-tilling, we're getting a lot of potassium. What happens is any residue left on top of the soil, the infrared, the ultraviolet rays from the sunshine next summer are going to hit it and break it down and oxidize it. There is probably 40 to 1, 50 to 1, 60 to 1 a large ratio of carbon to nitrogen in that residue that is going to leave you. The chemical companies want us to do this. The fertilizer companies want us to do this because that assures them business next year, and the year after, and the year after that. So, with potassium, potassium hangs on to moisture. Here's the other thing is, if you have an excess of potassium on top, you're going to get a watery, washy plant, because when a plant is looking for mama, looking for calcium, if it can't find it, it's like, oh crap, I hear some potassium. It's real close, it's right side by side on the periodic table. We'll grab potassium. Potassium's job is to hang on to moisture like a Gatorade. It hydrates. It hangs on to water. We know that this is true because if you've ever been running a weed eater or a weed trimmer, you're trimming grass, and all of a sudden you hit a broadleaf weed, and you get sprayed with water. Weeds love potassium. Potassium grabs moisture. Moisture lowers the sugar content or the bricks of the plant, and all of a sudden now you are susceptible to disease. Intelligent incorporation of some of the residue. Please take a look at it as a possible option. That's potassium. Likes to grow weeds when it's in excess. The next mineral is, could be my brother. If people were named minerals, my brother would have been named magnesium, because he had to sit right between mom and dad in church because he just couldn't contain himself and he couldn't quit screwing around, and he had to have calcium and phosphorus, one on each side of him, just to keep him under control. Magnesium is the mineral that is also electrically active. But if your magnesium is in excess, and what I mean by that, on your soil test, if you have more than 15% base saturation of magnesium, you have too much, and you'll have sticky, slimy, greasy when it's wet soil, and you'll have hard as a rock, dry, hard when it dries off. Magnesium is a greedy mineral, and it electrically hangs on to nitrogen. The higher the magnesium is in your soil, the more nitrogen it will tie up. You've seen some fields where you put the same amount of nitrogen across the whole field, and you're looking at it, it's like, that part of the field looks like it's low in nitrogen. Got the same amount. Guarantee you got more magnesium in that area tying it up. If there's a problem child in the house, in this particular house, is the soil, mama's usually the first one to fix the problem. When you apply available calcium to the soil, it will see the magnesium and go, oh, you need to come here, and it's a motherly love that's going to hug the magnesium. The nitrogen gets kicked off. Oh, there's more free nitrogen. And then the magnesium will say, you need to sit here and be good. And what's going to form is a natural compound called dolomite. Calcium, magnesium. In our world, when we can flip that soil with a moldboard plow every 4 or 5 years because we get more rain, that calcium that has migrated down flips back over, and it migrates down and starts grabbing onto the magnesium, calming it down. You will notice that the higher the magnesium in the soil, the higher the surface tension is with the penetrometer. It's the tightest, nastiest, most potentially horrible soil on the planet. But it has the most nutrients of any soil on the planet. And when you get mom in charge and calcium comes in and says, you guys need to relax right now and just chill, all of a sudden these nutrients become available. They're not tied up. Now, along with this, every mineral has an electrical value. Now, we're going to get deep into physics here. Stick with me, I'll go slow. The charges in the polarity is either a positive or a negative. With me so far? Okay. These charges have different degrees of strength. You not only have to balance the minerals on a volumetric level, but also on an electrical value. And that's where this measures the electricity or the attraction. Magnesium is kind of like a teenager in love. For that first love, they're hanging on each other. You almost have to pry them apart. What keeps teenagers in love apart? Putting mom right in the middle of them cools everything down. So if you have tight soil, high compaction, probably have a calcium deficiency. Magnesium is when it's in excess, ties up nitrogen. That's the mineral that makes your soil tight. And that's one of the minerals that can be easily relaxed to allow air and water into your soil. The third electrolyte mineral is sulfur. Sulfur is like the quiet, shy child that at family events, all of a sudden you're sitting at the table and it's like, where'd sulfur go? It's like, oh, they leached away here half an hour ago. Nobody even noticed. Sulfur can leach up. Sulfur can leach down, just like nitrogen. Sulfur is very, very important because it carries and holds electrical charges. What the heck am I talking about here? If you don't have enough sulfur in your soil, you don't have enough battery. And what I mean by that is in everybody's vehicle, there's a battery. And the fluid that's in there is sulfuric acid, a derivative of sulfur or sulfate. You need 30 to 40 parts per million of sulfur or sulfate in your soil to carry and hold the electrical charge that each and every beneficial microbe creates. What do I mean by that? Every microbe is electrical. Now, thought, your heart. Everybody's got one. A lot of people try to act, oh, I don't have a heart. You got a heart. What makes your heart run?
The SA node.
The what?
The SA node. And it goes down throh the Purkinje fibers and it's electricity.
What kind of energy would it be?
Electric.
Dang it, that's a 20. Stop answering questions. It's electrical. Our heartbeat is electrical, and it beats 80,000 to 100,000 times a day. Heartbeat, air, and romance are sometimes combined. None of them are important unless you're not getting one of them. If your heart stops, now all of a sudden it's important. If you can't breathe, too much pressure, air is important. If you're not getting romance, that's your own problem. We're not going there today. But with this, the electricity of our heart, these microbes and almost each and every beneficial aerobic air-breathing CO2 exhaling microbe in the soil carries a half of a volt of electricity. And this half of a volt of electricity is what pushes and pulls the minerals to and through the soil. We can measure this. We don't guess, we measure. This is a very common handheld EC meter, electrical conductivity meter. Most people will grab this, they'll jab it in the soil and take one look and say, okay. It's like, let's take just a little bit more time and look at the electricity. The probes that this reads the electricity are the two shiny points. So let's say my fingers are the top of the soil. You stick it in just a little bit till you see a number. If you have a high salt or high sodium area in your soil, sodium is molecularly light and will come to the top. And if you're getting kochia or foxtail or ticklegrass growing, you have a sodium or saline or salt problem. And if this number is over a 1.0, do not put any microbes down there because it's going to fry them. They don't have a chance. It doesn't matter how much love you put into growing them, composting them, extracting them. You just threw them in, you burned them. They can't handle that much electricity. The microbe electrical route that they enjoy for an environment is between a 0.3 and a 0.9, 0.3 to 0.9. These microbes have to have all the minerals, the calcium, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and sulfur, and many others for their structure, but they also have to have the right electrical environment. Now, anybody that has irrigation water, you can also use this to check your irrigation water. Rainwater, deionized water, distilled water, RO water, any water that's been treated and snow melt should show up as a 0.00. There should be no electricity in pure water. This is water I brought from home.
0.52.
0.52. Not very good water. What's that mean? There's too much electricity. It's grabbing onto other stuff. This electricity is carrying minerals. Water is meant to carry oxygen and nutrients from the soil. We don't know what minerals this water is carrying. The old timers, and I'm becoming one of them very quickly, would say, boy, half an inch of rain is worth an inch and a half of irrigation water. That's because rainwater or snow has a zero conductivity. As you look at your soil, if you have a sodic or saline area and you see a high number over 1.0, there's too much tension, there's too much electricity. And what I mean by that is you've heard the adage, a little salt in the wound burns. It's what it's going to do to the microbes. How do you get rid of that tightness and that excess electricity in salt and sodium? Available calcium. Calcium is a direct or indirect fix to almost everything. So, go to the other part of the field, and as you push down, if this number stays at a 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3 as you go down, the more consistent that number is through this profile, the more biological controlled that environment is. These microbes have microscopic jobs. They have microscopic zones, and they have microscopic job descriptions in environments they like. The more consistent the electricity is, top to bottom, the better and longer life the microbes that are already there will have, and any microbes that you can put out will have. We covered a lot of ground. I don't know how well I'm doing. Questions, comments, or concerns? Yes, sir. This is microsiemens or millimos, and it used to be in ergs, ERGS, energy release per gram per second, but they're changing it to a decimal point, so that 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, that's what your first energy should be in planting or first emergence, and then reproduction takes more energy, should be a 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, or 0.9.
I was just reading that number that were 90.
Depending on what scale you have measured with, if they're measuring ergs, or microsiemens or millimos, you just move the decimal place 2 or 3 points. So 900 would be a 0.9. Make sense? Thank you. Questions, comments, concerns?
So, Glenn, let's say I take that out and I go out and let's say a guy grazed his corn stalks and he, was hoping they didn't have that much damage, but he puts them down and he's not packed soil because he was grazing his milo stalks. What's the first step if he wants to loosen up his soils and maybe possibly go back with corn after his milo stalks? What's the next step?
I'm going to answer a question with a question, if that's okay. We have problem soil. We all do. Nobody's special. It's just the way it is. We're the ambulance crew. Stick with me here for a second. We go to the scene of the accident or the problem. What's the first thing an EMT checks for? Are they breathing? So, before you do this, check your air, check your respiration. Because if you've got a heartbeat and you're not breathing, the future doesn't look that good. So you got to have both. This is the heartbeat, the electrical heartbeat that is designed to come from microbes. And this is the respiration that calcium will provide by relaxing the soil. Now, I need to jump back a little bit. Wait, hang on. Jay, did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, I didn't know, like, I mean, aside from calcium, is there, like, I mean, one thing we try to do is, like, if we have a compaction area that we're trying to fix, we like to use sorghum Sudan grasses, you know, a high amount of sorghum Sudan grass and pearl millets to try to break up or tillage radishes to break up those compaction issues. And you're suggesting applying GSR, the calcium product that you guys have. What are other solutions to breaking up compaction other than those two things?
God, I'm glad you hear this. You put on a good show. Well, thanks for being here. But with that, okay, other options to fight compaction. We're going to switch gears here a little bit. And please don't look at the front of this book. It's kind of been through a war. But the name of this book is When Weeds Talk. And over the years, we've been highlighting weeds that we have naturally eradicated by balancing the soil, by balancing the pH, by getting air into the soil. If you want to get air into the soil quick, we make a calcium for that. If you're not in a hurry, you can plant things. What do I mean by that? When you walk, if you get your neighbor to buy a penetrometer, go into one of his pastures and look for some thistles, or some musk thistles or Canada thistles, or big, ugly, nasty, heavy, tap-rooted weeds. And what you'll do is you'll be going along and all of a sudden it's like, the ground that these thistles are growing in is a lot harder than where they're not. A weed is not a plant growing out of place. It's got a big, heavy taproot, and a taproot of a Canada thistle or musk thistle can push through up to and over 800 psi of pressure to break open that hard pan, to get down to where the calcium is migrated, and to bring it back up. And then when that root and plant dies, it distributes a little bit of calcium to soften and relax the soil. So if you've got hard pan or plow pan, do what you got to do, but plant some plants that have a good heavy taproot. Now, it's been a few years since I've been down here in Kansas. I know you guys don't have the problem, but do any of your neighbors possibly have some yellow mustard growing in their fields from time to time? If you got neighbors that are growing it, I get it. Yellow mustard is a weed that enjoys salt and sodium, just like kochia. The yellow mustard will grow in a lower salt and sodium than what a kochia will. And if you watch those salt and sodium areas, what was yellow mustard, as it gets heavier yellow mustard, you're going to now get kochia growing. And as that kochia gets bigger, and if the salt gets higher, the kochia and the yellow mustard won't grow, but now you'll get ticklegrass or wild barley or foxtail, depending on the area that you call it. And that all can be monitored with this. And in our country, the low ground, that used to be the best ground, is now dead. The chemical farmers have killed it with the conventional salts and sodium from the fertilizers and the chemicals. And if you go into those areas, they always work those areas. And that's like you're working the wrong area. Because I've given guys this penetrometer, I say, now these dead areas, as you guys keep working, that is the softest, most mellow part of your field. And they go, oh, you think you know so much. I said, be careful. I said, you'll tip over. So they're ready to push down, and they push down, and they go to their knuckles, and they take a couple steps like, what happened? I said, sodium is all positively charged. It's like polarities repel. It's like putting 6 big dudes into a small closet. There's going to be some pushing and shoving, and somebody's going to probably get popped. Dudes don't want to hang on to each other that close, so there's repulsion. It's all about electricity. If you have the wrong electricity, microbes won't stand a chance. If you have the wrong electricity, the minerals won't structure. That answers your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we got to keep on going, otherwise I'm going to run out of time here. If we go over to the right side of the page, composition of a healthy plant. These numbers, if you've never seen them before, are quite new. They're quite fresh. I pulled them out of a book that was published in 1859. The professors and scientists and agronomists have known this information for a long time. Now, the composition that we have here is the composition of a healthy plant. Healthy being without disease, without impairment. No armyworms, rootworms, cutworms, wireworms, no leafhoppers, no aphids, no fungal diseases. This plant has enough immunity to fight that off. This can be corn, this can be canola, this can be cantaloupe. All sun-loving plants react to this. So, what would you suppose? 47% is the biggest number on there. What does that 47% make up? Who said that? Yeah. Did you see it there? Nice. Oh, there's another 20. I got to quit asking questions. Thank you for that. Carbon makes up 47%, hear this, of the dry matter. Now, anybody that does rations with livestock, you always look at dry matter. Moisture is a variable. Most plants, while they're growing in the field, will be anywhere from 70 to 90% water. Water's a variable. Let's throw that out and look at dry matter. So let's just say on average, most plants are 80% water. We're now looking at 20% of the dry matter. 47% of that dry matter is carbon. Other than the sneaky guy over here, 43% is the next. Hey, I see you looking. 43% is the next inclusion, is oxygen. Okay, help me out here with the math. 47 and 43, we're at 90%. What was your carbon and oxygen bill last year for your inputs? Yeah. Next inclusion is 4%. 4% is hydrogen. There's something that you probably never heard of on an agronomy or soil or microbiological meeting. Hydrogen. Why would we talk about hydrogen? Well, if you remember anything about chemistry, a plant lays its leaves out to gather sunlight, water, and minerals, which is making sugar, photosynthesis. The chemical formulation for sugar is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. C6H12O6 is sugar. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen make up 94% of the plant. Why in the wide world of sports are we buying so much nitrogen? Because the plant can't breathe. The soil can't breathe, and the minerals aren't balanced. And nobody in the agronomy world and in the industrial synthetic fertilizer chemical world wants us to figure it out. Should make no mistake, it's big business. We all know what we spend a year on inputs. So 47% carbon, 43% oxygen, 4% hydrogen, nitrogen. Here comes the big one. 3% is the only amount that plant wants if it has enough carbon and oxygen. Here's something they won't tell you in agronomical school. When a plant is looking for carbon and oxygen, and if it can't find it, you're like, oh crap. All right, we'll take some nitrogen. If a plant is looking for calcium and can't find it, it will grab potassium. It's a dirty trick to a plant looking for carbon, and here's some nitrogen. It's just like if I'd say, hey, who likes a big fat steak dinner? Everybody raises their hands and say, dinner's on me. We go to the steakhouse, and here comes your plates, and everybody gets a hot dog or a corn dog. It's like, well, I asked you if you like steak. I didn't tell you I was going to buy it for you. These plants are getting pissed. And there's an old commercial that says, don't mess with Mother Nature. She will win. Or it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Mother Nature will win. If you want to decrease your nitrogen bill, increase your carbon and oxygen in the soil, because it makes up 90% of the plant. It's this simple. Okay, we have 3% left. We got 47 carbon, 43 oxygen, 4% hydrogen, 3% nitrogen. What's the last 3%? Wait, no, I'm going to say, because I think I'm out of money. The last 3% that makes up a healthy plant is the soil minerals. So when I say if you get your soil minerals on your soil test sheet exactly perfect, you're going to score a 45 or a 50% on your soil test. Guess what percent you're going to score on the plant test? 3? I wonder why there's so many problems in agriculture. Now we're coming to the meat. This is the good stuff here. This is where the rubber hits the road. Most important mineral content of a healthy plant. A healthy plant needs to lay its leaves out, gather sunlight, water, minerals, and make sugar. Within the plant, there's a transportation system. When that plant makes sugar, there's a movement that's called the phloem that grabs that sugar and pushes down out the root tips, called a root exudate. That's sugar, water, and minerals. If that plant is producing a fair bit of sugar, up to and over half of it can be pushed out the root tips. That's microbe food. That's what gets the microbes partying and doing their thing. The xylem is when the microbes break off minerals and there's water there. The minerals go up the next day so the plant can make more sugar to send it down to feed the roots. It's a wonderful symphony that when it happens, it lowers your input costs, it increases the nutrition of what you're growing, it increases your revenue. Two of the things that are most important is you got to have a 2% level in the tissue, in the petiole, of calcium for that plant to photosynthetically make sugar. The 0.3% of the 0.3 has to be phosphorus. Mom and dad have to be there, they have to be present, and they have to work to make sugar. If you don't have 2% calcium, if you don't have 0.3% phosphorus, you're not going to make sugar. How do you know you're making sugar? Because we have another tool. This is so much fun, we can test everything. $100 piece of equipment called a refractometer. Our Amish customers will call it the refractometer or the sugar meter. Take any drop of juice that you can squeeze out. Now, if this looks like a garlic press to anybody, you're exactly right. Put some plant tissue in there, give it a squeeze, put a couple drops on, close the lid, point it to the light, and the light will refract through the fluid and show you how much sugar is in that sap. Here's the numbers that they don't want us to know. At 8 bricks of sugar, you now have immunity and protection against detrimental fungus, algae, and mold. Phytophthora, Rhizoctonia, Pythium, Fusarium, pick your critter, rust. All of these fungal diseases are all part of the same scumbag family. They don't like sugar content over 8 bricks, B-R-I-X, and they don't like available calcium and phosphorus in the plant, making sugar to show that up. 8 bricks of sugar, you now have fungal resistance and immunity. The next big level is 10 bricks of sugar. This is a good one. At 10 bricks of sugar, that's the level that most weeds do not enjoy. To finish the comment, they say a weed is just a plant growing out of place. A weed enjoys the exact opposite that our food crops do. Wants the exact opposite. What do I mean by that? Okay, we know that calcium and phosphorus, as mom and dad and our food growing plants want, love, and will appreciate that. We know that with the refractometer and what a healthy plant is made of, carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen is very important to the essence of the plant, which is sugar. At 10 bricks of sugar, there's a separation. Your weeds will start getting smaller. You're engineering an environment to grow food rather than weeds. So these guys that say, oh, we've got super weeds, oh, we've got chemical resistant weeds, it's like, yeah, that's a problem, but it's not the problem. You have screwed up soil. They have obnoxiously high levels of potassium, they have low calcium, they have low phosphorus, they have low carbon, they have low oxygen, and they have problems. Engineer the environment to grow things that make you money. So at 10 bricks of sugar, weeds are going the wrong or the good way. They're going down. They're not appreciating it. Many times a big tall weed will bow down to you because it's not happy or healthy. At 10 bricks of sugar, the next thing that happens is normally whatever your nitrogen bill used to be, you can cut it in half. I'm going to say that in a different way. At 10 bricks of sugar, you now have enough carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen that the plant only needs 50% of the nitrogen that it used to. Now we're getting to some fun stuff here. Cutting down on the inputs. Please don't cut back drastically on anything until you know where you're at. This is the fuel tank. This is the heartbeat. And this is the respiration. It's like taking the doctor to the soil, or vice versa. Okay, we're not done yet. 10 bricks of sugar. Weeds are starting to go backwards. Nitrogen is cut in half. Here's a big one. Your irrigation costs will normally be cut by anywhere from 30 to 50%. I'm going to say that again. At 10 bricks of sugar, you will be able to reduce your water by 30 to 50%. Why? Because carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, sugar, electrically hangs on to water. It will pull it from the air that we know as humidity, and it will hang on to it until the plant pulls it or the soil pulls it away. It will absorb into the soil, it will absorb into the plant, it will absorb anywhere that that carbon is. Now, I'm not a big fan of genetically modified plants. I get why people do it. As you work your way and get to health, when you get to 10 bricks of sugar, you can normally say goodbye to genetic modification, because you're never going to get it any higher than probably 11 or 12 bricks of sugar. It's been genetically modified to grow in imbalanced soil and to grow like a weed. It is not food. It is designed to be fuel. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings or try to offend anybody, but it is what it is. Genetic modified plants will not pick up phosphorus because it's a terminal seed. You can't take it and replant it. you feed GMO corn silage or corn to a female, you will have reproductive problems. Before I got into the soil business, I was in the animal pharmaceutical and nutritional end. And I did autopsies, and we figured out why animals were dying. The number one reason that people quit feeding genetically modified corn to hog units or to any female dairy barns or to any female anything is because their reproduction went to crap. So, at 10 bricks of sugar, you can take a look at being conventional. If you're planting a GMO, I get it. You got to do what you got to do to survive. Many years farming is a survival. We're not done yet. At 12 or 13 bricks of sugar, and this is just taking plant sap out of the plant, squeezing it, looking at it. At 12, 13, 14 bricks of sugar, here's a fun one. You now have natural insecticidal resistance. What do I mean by that? I'm up here rattling off a lot of stuff, but we bought and paid for a lot of this information. With our research greenhouse, we hired an entomologist on retainer. Entomologists study insects. And I said, and this is years and years ago, and they'd say, everybody tells us that sugar kills insects. He says, well, it does. I said, why? How? He says, plant-feeding insects are born and live without a pancreas. They can't digest sugar at a level of 12, 13, 14 bricks of sugar. That sugar will ferment, turn to alcohol, and kill them. And people say there wasn't a plan in the first 6 days things got put together. There definitely was a plan. Sugar, which consists of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, is the essence to everything that saves and makes you money. But if the soil can't breathe, lack of calcium, you're not going to get there. Questions on sugar content? Okay, moving on. Right below it, whatever that says in the box, why carbon to nitrogen ratios matter. If you haven't done a carbon to nitrogen ratio on your soil, please specify and ask for it. It is the most important number on your soil test. Why? Because carbon makes up 47% of the dry matter weight of the plant. It's the essence of success. Carbon to nitrogen. If you ask academia, say, what are we shooting for carbon and nitrogen? They'll lean and they go, oh my God. And I've had many universities do this. Say, oh, you probably have 8 or 10 times more carbon than nitrogen. Making it sound like, oh my gosh, we are loaded with carbon. When you talk to the microbiologists, they'll say an 8-to-1 carbon and nitrogen, which is the answer to the first line. Most soils have an 8, 9, or 10-to-1 carbon to nitrogen. The microbiologist will say an 8-to-1 will just keep microbes alive. They will do no work. They will save you no money. They will break down nothing. They're just like people we know or people we've hired. They're there, but they're not getting anything done. They're a waste of air and good water. Next number. God, I'm going deaf and blind. Beneficial soil microbes require at least a 16-to-1 minimum. If you don't have a 16-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio in your soil, please don't spend a lot of money on putting bugs of any sort down, because you're going to starve them. 16 to 1 is the minimum level microbes need to do work, to be beneficial, to make you and save you money. Okay, you hear a lot of talk about mycorrhizal fungi. It's like, oh, they say, don't till your soil, don't do anything to the soil because you will destroy the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. If you don't have an 18 to 1 carbon and nitrogen, you're not going to destroy any mycorrhizal fungi. They're not there. And last but not least, balanced aerobic compost should be 30 to 1, 33 to 1. That is good compost. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are piling up shit and mixing it around and calling it compost. If it isn't at least a 16 to 1 carbon to nitrogen, getting it free would be expensive. It's not worth it. Now, my background in the animal pharmaceuticals, and nothing against the livestock, guys. Please don't kill the messenger. This is just the way it is. If you put out liquid or dehydrated or composted dairy manure, for every 1,000 gallons of manure you put out, you're going to put out 30 to 50 pounds of potassium. If you're a no-till farmer, you already have potassium excess because of the residue that's laying on top. If you can incorporate a little bit of that with some intelligent way, you can start breaking that down, getting the carbon in. They say that you shouldn't disturb the soil because you're going to kill microbes. You will. Any type of penetration or any type of soil movement, you will kill microbes. But you may suffocate them if you have more than 150 psi surface tension. If you don't have a 16 to 1 carbon and nitrogen, you're going to starve the little bastards. What a tough way to die. Looking at your carbon to nitrogen, the good people that are holding hands saying we need to save the earth and we have way too much carbon, you guys can capitalize on that. There's money here for you guys to make, but that air that's around us has to get into the soil. It has to breathe. Everything has to have air that's good. Now, the other thing is, if you haven't done a carbon to nitrogen, and if you haven't checked the sugar content of your plant, please do, because if for some electrical lightning shot of nature that these companies want to pay farmers for sequestering carbon, you want to have your numbers in the past so you can show them what you're doing. So when they say, well, you know, most people sequester about a ton and that's worth about $23, and you can say, no, we sequestered 4 ton because we have a deep aerobic zone, we have carbon to get it going, and now 4 times 23, now you're looking at something that's a little bit more viable. But in order to sequester it, nobody's telling you this, but you have to show them where you used to be. The carbon content of the soil is the most overlooked, underspoken, and never least checked in the soil. If you haven't checked the carbon and nitrogen, please, please, please do. Now, if you're low in carbon, here comes some potential craziness. Liquid molasses in the starter. Liquid molasses as a foliar. Sugar as a foliar. If you're low in carbon and you need to spray a chemical, here's a twist. 1 pound of sugar in with your chemical per acre, whether it's a fungicide, a herbicide, an insecticide, or a pesticide. Why? Because all of these problems, which the industry say are the problem, they're just a problem. A weed isn't a plant growing out of place. A weed is saying, hey, this soil's really tight, or it's high salt, or it's low phosphorus, it's crappy, and I'm here to show you that I'm trying to fix it. Here comes the spray boom. Oh, it's just killed the scout. And we wonder why we're going backwards. Calcium, phosphorus, carbon, oxygen are the first 4 things you need to look at to start creating the environment for microbes. Okay, pH was one of the promises that I made. Anybody tell you how to raise or lower the pH in your soil? Anybody have neighbors that have a high pH soil? Is this the English-speaking group? Okay. You have a high pH. In the world of physics, pH is a measurement of resistance. The higher the pH gets, the more pressure you have to push to get anything through. We see this. If you're at a 7.5, 8, 8.5, the higher the pH, the tighter it is, the more resistance in the physicist world. But let's jump back to chemistry. The chemists say, well, pH is a measurement of potential hydrogen. Okay. What in the wide world of sports does that mean? As the actual pH number goes up, the potential becomes greater. In other words, as the pH number goes up, the actual hydrogen goes down. We need to capture hydrogen because as you capture hydrogen, that lowers the potential hydrogen that can be held. Now, what on earth do we know that hangs on to water that's beneficial, that makes up the majority of the plant? Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, i.e. sugar. Yeah, molasses, sugar, leonardite, stubble, anything that can be intelligently incorporated into the soil. In a starter, however it is, in a strip till, you have to increase the carbon content because carbon holds and controls 4 to 8 times its weight in hydrogen, hydrogen being a major part of H2O. The more carbon you have, the less a drought will affect you. To give you an idea, we do a lot of work in many parts of the world where the growing season is longer. We have successfully dropped the pH in many, many different fields, no-till on orchards or full tillage. We've dropped them a full point to 1.5 points in one fiscal year. It's possible. How does this happen? How can it be? Adding a little sugar, adding a little molasses, the sugar's going to drop the pH. You tell it to your agronomist and go, oh, is that bald guy from South Dakota? Because we've heard him say that crap before. Here's the science behind it. When microbes have carbon, they have the raw ingredient to breathe in and exhale carbon dioxide, CO2. When you have a whole pile of microbes honeymooning, partying like it was 1999 or senior year right after finals, they're giving an awful lot of huffing and puffing and CO2. Here comes the irrigation or the rain. Here's the science. H2O and CO2 make carbonic acid, a very mild, soft, natural, organic acid that slowly drops the pH and massages the potential hydrogen back down to a 6.4, 6.5, which is where your phosphorus is more available, which is where your beneficial microbes love to be, which is where the availability of all the other nutrients work better, and that's also where the plant sap pH should be a 6.4 as well. Makes sense. Questions?
How much molasses?
Oh,
So we fit in.
how much molasses? Good question. what's the carbon and nitrogen content of your soil. And I don't mean to be a smart jack, but here's the thing is don't just take this information and go, let's try a gallon. It's not going to do it. It's like peeing on a prairie fire. You're not going to get the results you want. In a corn crop, what we're seeing is going to be anywhere from 10 to 50 gallons of molasses per acre per year. If it's a pivot, spoon feed it little by little. Anytime you put nutrients out on the soil or on the crop, small amounts more often are more beneficial and more economical for you. The selling companies don't like it because they want to sell big volumes. Not every day can be Thanksgiving where you eat too much and you have to, Grandpa unbuttons his pants and everybody lays around sleeping afterwards because they ate too much. Small amounts more often. Molasses is a slow breakdown. It's a longer chain carbohydrate. Put some sugar with it. 2 to 3 gallons at a time of molasses, and the molasses can be 30 to 35 bricks of sugar. Molasses, the intensity is measured in sugar content in bricks. So that 33%, you can pump it with a trash pump. It works very well, and it's easy to handle. The molasses is a longer chain carbon that's going to be lunch for the microbes tomorrow, next Tuesday, and next Saturday. Put some white sugar with it that's a short chain carbohydrate or a short chain carbon that'll feed them right now. What you're doing is you're feeding the indigenous microbes and they will correct the soil. I'm going to give you a little bit of a review again. You have to have a large volume of microbes exhaling CO2. As they exhale CO2, they have to volumetrically push that CO2 up because CO2 is 1.5 times heavier than air. So if somebody tells you, oh golly, don't till your soil because you're going to lose all your carbon. If that carbon's in CO2 form, it won't leave you because it's 1.5 times heavier than the air. There's a reason that these people are telling you not to do what sometimes need to be done because they get to sell you more stuff. Along with the CO2 and the water H2O forming carbonic acid, something else happens. Many strains, hundreds if not thousands of strains of the microbes that you may be growing or buying are lactobacillus bugs, which is lactic acid producing. And as these lactic acid producing bugs die off, they give off a little more lactic acid that adds to the carbonic acid that keeps lowering the pH. As these microbes die, they start turning into humus. Humus is something you probably haven't seen on your soil test because not many of us have it. Humus comes from decaying microbes. The reason we don't have any is because all the microbes have gone to sleep or have vacated the facility because of the environment that we've created. So, the last 5 things on the sheet, top 5 things for soil and plant health, and this is in order. Number 1 is calcium. If you don't have available calcium in the whole stratosphere or the profile of your soil, you're not going to get good microbes to reproduce, party, and work for you. Number 2, phosphorus. Mom and Dad, calcium and phosphorus will allow the plant to start making sugar to feed the microbes so that down the road you don't have to buy any more molasses and sugar. This isn't a forever thing. As the soil gets going, as Mother Nature gets tuned in, your input costs keep going down. The plant's designed to make sugar. We're just trying to help it along to get things going. So calcium and phosphorus make sugar. That's the power plant. That's the sugar production. Number 3, you got to have carbon in the soil. You got to be at least a 16-to-1. If you don't have a 16-to-1, don't expect fantastic results from any microbial pack. It won't happen. You'll throw those microbes out, then they'll do no, we're not doing it. There's nothing to eat here. We're going to starve. And then you're going to be disappointed, and then wherever that microbial pack or extractor came from, you're going to have a beef with. let's alleviate that. So, calcium and phosphorus, carbon's number 3. Number 4 is oxygen. And the only place you're going to get that is from the atmosphere. Those 4 things, when they are in alignment, and you have it in the plant, and you have it throughout the soil, and that soil can breathe, then, number 5, you'll see the full extent and the full wonderment of aerobic, beneficial soil microbes. Whether you extract them, whether you buy them. I don't know if you were here earlier, Jay. I said, what you've seen is fantastic on your farm, but as you start fine-tuning and changing some things, it's just, this is going to be so much fun you can't even stand it. It's just the beginning. How am I doing on time? 30 seconds left. Okay. Okay. I apologize for covering as much as I did, as quick as I did. Each one of these topics could have been 3 hours, and I don't think any of us have the desire to go through that. The reason we brought Tony, or some people refer to him as Anthony, I'm sure there's a joke there somewhere, to videotape this is we blew through a lot of information. You can go back and review it. We have other videos on YouTube that just talk about this, or the EC meter, or how to adjust the pH. So it's information that can be added to the fantastic information that Jay has shown you on his extractor. So if there aren't any further questions, oh, yes, sir.
What time of day are you checking the bricks?
What time of day are you checking the bricks? Great question. If you check it in the middle of the afternoon, that's going to be the highest sugar content. If you check it in the early morning, that's going to be the lowest sugar content, because boron is a mineral that comes to work at night and pulls sugar down from the plant down to the root tips. If you see a 2-brick change from day to night, you've got a root problem. There's something working on that root, and that plant's going, uh-oh, we may have some cutworms. Let's shove some sugar down there if it has it. You want to get rid of rootworms, cutworms, wireworms, armyworms? Put some sugar and molasses in your starter. But the highest point is 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Lowest point is first thing at sunrise in the morning.
You're checking both, then comparing them, or...
Now, if you do have a refractometer, and we've had so many guys say, oh, I've had a refractometer for 20 years, I haven't got anything to move. It's never moved on me. It hasn't moved in 20 years. It's like I said, there's 4 things that you're short of or out of balance. Those 4 things are on your sheet. Available calcium, available phosphorus, carbon, oxygen, and then microbes. One quick thing. On the extractors, and I need to be very clear on this. We can't get enough parts quick enough to keep up with the wonderful response Jay has created and with the natural business that we have been doing. Part of the reason I'm here is to say, let's look at your soil, because there's no way we can get enough parts to make everybody an extractor or to make 30 extractors. We're fighting to get parts with 5 or 10 at a time. One time we order, it's one thing. The next time we order, it's something else. And every stinking time we order, the price goes up. So if you've talked to our office and they said, well, the price today is such and such, but we don't know what's going to be next week, that isn't bullshit. That's real. So my point with this, and this is what we do everywhere, please work on your soil before you bring kids home, microbes, so you have the biggest, best benefit that you possibly can. So if that's it, I appreciate your time. Thank you for...
I got some questions for you.
I don't know if I can.
Very fine. So your GSR calcium, how are they applying that? Like when people purchase the calcium from you, how are they applying that to their fields?
To topically apply our GSR calcium, It has to be mixed with water and topically applied, and we have to have soil contact. If you have a ½ inch or an inch of residue on top of your soil, don't put it down. If you have a liquid attachment on your planter, now this is going to sound crazy, 25 grams of calcium in your starter mix on your planter, along with sugar, molasses, fish, soft rock, and microbes, will absolutely make your plant get up and dance as far as germination and emergence. Our calcium is a dry product that we have physically dry deionized from calcium carbonate out of 44,000 pounds. Once we get done, we've never had gotten 10% of usable calcium out of it. It's an electrically available calcium. If you need to get rid of salt, sodium, or relax magnesium, that's the cheapest, quickest, easiest way that we found on the planet to do it. And it's not just because we make it. We have no competition on the deal, and I wish we did. So broadcast application, if you don't ever want to do any tillage and you don't ever want to see bare ground, I get that. The only other option would be in the planter, right in the slot, right on the seed, 25 grams.
Through a pivot?
Through a pivot will work wonderful, but you have to have agitation. Calcium is heavy, ours is very heavy, and it will slide down, so you need to have agitation in your holding tank to keep it in suspension to inject it out. Yep.
So if they're wanting to do the calcium and get the molasses and microbes, then they would need to have something to make an extract and add all those things in the extract, or what's a way to get the molasses and all that stuff going if you're going to put it on as a starter when you plant?
If you were to put it on in a starter, and here's the thing is, if you don't have an extractor and you don't have any opportunity for microbes, putting down the calcium, the sugar, the molasses, possibly liquid fish, what's going to happen is that's going to absorb into the seed. Now, you just brought up one other thing. Does anybody look at the test weight of your seed corn?
Yes.
Please do. When we grow corn to sell it, they want 56 pound plus. A lot of this seed corn is 38 to 40 to 42 pound test weight. Please check the test weight of your seed corn, because it should be a crime. Yes, sir.
Is the test weight more important or the 1,000 kernel weight?
Is the test weight more important or the kernel weight? Test weight.
Okay.
Because the kernel weight is going to depend on the size of the kernel.
You got a question in the back.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, I know one of the corns that has been grown normally here was one that had a smooth seed coat on it. Mm-hmm. And it routinely grew 64-pound corn, and it was really tough as a seed dealer, which I was at one point, to get anybody to change, because you can put a whole lot more 64-pound corn in your bin than you can put 58-pound corn. Mm-hmm. And it all had to do with the 1,000 kernel weight.
Yeah. On that note, we're in South Dakota, we're famous for very few things. One thing we're famous for is the Corn Palace in Mitchell. If you've ever seen it, you've probably been politely disappointed. But it's covered with Indian corn that the cobs are sawed in half. And Indian corn or flint corn, just like popcorn, doesn't dent. Why? Oh, golly, I had $100 on this one. It hasn't been genetically screwed with by the geneticist, and it only grows to its nutrient-gathering ability. If you ask a geneticist, why does a kernel of corn shrink and dent? They will politely do well, that's just the maturing process of the plant. In the absence of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen and mineral, that plant and kernel is full of water, and upon maturing, the more water, the more shrink, the smaller the seed, the bigger the dent. Usually that's because of high potassium hanging out in the water. Get carbon into the system, molasses and sugar, and you can start changing that and increasing your test weight. Sorry, I got off on a whole other this is what happens.
Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, can you compare that GSR to other available forms of calcium, agricultural lime, and also gypsum? Like, what's the difference? Why is it, what's the difference?
Why is it horribly expensive, and why is it packaged in 1 and 5 pound bags? Any calcium that you buy from a mine is mined, unrefined lime. In other words, it's married to something. Calcium that comes out of many mines is married to carbonate. Calcium carbonate is the predominant calcium in the world, in the soil. You can buy gypsum, which the calcium is married to sulfate. Some cases, if you have sand, you will buy dolomite, where calcium is married to magnesium. That's a bond that has to be broken. Whether it's a calcium carbonate, a calcium sulfate, or calcium magnesium, a divorce has to happen. And you have to have air, you have to have acid, or you have to have microbes to separate that. It takes energy to separate it, and if you're going to put one of those forms on, it's a good form of calcium, but only put down 750 pounds or less per year, because that's all it's going to digest. Otherwise, it's going to go down in the profile as a compound and sit there with the rest of the calcium carbonate and do you no good. The calcium that we have is available and it's ready to go. We have pulled it from the carbonate, basically stripped it down, divorced it, dressed it back up, cleaned it up with organic natural nutrients that are water-soluble, plant and microbe friendly that break down in the water. So when that calcium hits the soil, it's available right now. And it will take care of surface tension or compaction as it goes through the soil within a day. You'll see the difference. It's electrical. Does that answer your question?
So if you have...
Mr. Moneybucks.
Yeah, thanks.
Big bucks.
At the end of your fields where you parked your trucks and combines and grain carts, if you go out there and spray it on bare soil, the GSR, is that a good way to start breaking down compaction?
With our calcium, if you're not ever going to get black dirt, please don't even try to put our calcium down. Silage is the best place to put our calcium down after it's cut where you got black dirt. Anytime you put our calcium or any calcium down, keep in mind calcium's heavy. So if you're going to do some tillage, if you do that, do any tillage first and apply the calcium on top, because it'll naturally go down. It's hard to bring it back up again. So calcium needs to be applied on top. And anytime you have black dirt, like in a silage situation where you'd shown some of your fields, you want to see more tons on silage, boom. It'll work. Yes, sir.
Are you still doing the two formulations, the dormant and the growing? And if so, caution on using the dormant pre-plant.
We've got two forms of calcium, a dormant that's designed for the dirt and a growing that's designed for the plant. But in most cases, the soil has become so deficient, we still have them. They're still the same price per bag, but we're seeing better benefits, dollar in, dollar out, using the dormant because there's soil issues. Thank you.
Don't try and germinate a seed after making the dormant application, immediately after.
We can put 20 to 25 grams with sugar of the dormant on there and have fantastic germination.